Today's video is going to be about rewards, once again, specifically experience points. I want to grab hold of yesterday's video about treasure, which got quite a bit of good traction and is getting quite a few views for just being up for about 24 hours now. I think one of the reasons why that video has gained so many views is treasure is something that applies at all tables. It's something that every gaming group, it doesn't matter if you're playing another tabletop role-playing game or what edition of D&D you're playing, it's something that every group has to wrangle through in some fashion. And I think today is going to follow suit. This is going to be equally, if not more important. Let's quickly talk through, if I go to sources here under dungeons, you know what, I'll just type in milestone. What do we have? First, let me make sure everything is okay, we're good to go. Milestones. So here it is right now on screen. I'll read it to you, just a few brief bits. Milestones. You can also award XP when characters complete significant milestones. When preparing your adventure, designate certain events or challenges as milestones, accomplishing one in a series of goals necessary to complete the adventure. So basically making progress along the story. Reaching an important destination, maybe finishing something, completing the dungeon, and so on. The essence of milestones is you're telling the players when they are supposed to level up. So if you were to look through, and I'm going to open up multiple tabs here, the beauty and efficiency of D&D Beyond. If you look at the Demogorgon, right? The Demogorgon, this is some iconic thing. Doesn't look like this in Stranger Things. I think this is the guy. But anyway, we have a CR8 right there, 3,900 XP. The assumption, if you defeat this thing, if you beat it, and I know right now that can often mean, especially to new players, if you kill this thing. I'm going to talk a little bit about overcoming obstacles without necessarily slaying the beast in this video. But if you defeat this thing, you will be awarded with 3,900 XP, okay? So let's just round it up, just for simple math. Let's say this thing is worth 4,000 experience points. If you beat 2 of them, you're going to get 8,000 EXP. Okay, so what the milestone system does is it does away with all of that. If you journey into a dungeon, I'm going to go back here. If you journey into a dungeon, no matter how many monsters you beat, no matter what their CR is, no matter what other obstacles and challenges your group overcomes that might warrant the reward of experience points, none of that's tracked. And what'll happen is the milestone system says when the PCs leave the dungeon, give them a level. Okay? And it oftentimes follows suit and flows according to the adventure, which is why the milestone system is something that you will most often see in the pre-published official D&D stuff, like Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus, Storm King's Thunder, Dungeon of the Mad Mage. Almost all of the adventures have a milestone system that it uses. Okay, so it's basically telling you, don't worry about tracking EXP individually, just based on what arc in the story they are on. Where they are, level them up. Before they head down into Avernus, into the hellish area of that, your PC should be level 5, therefore milestone it. Once they've finished all the stuff up to that point, make them level 5, okay? Now, this video is not intended to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of milestone versus awarding actual XP points and numbers. It's not to talk about which one's right, wrong, better, or best. I've used both. One thing I will say, especially for new DMs, if you're running an adventure like Avernus, or I have to look through all of them, but like Ghosts of Saltmarsh, I know Storm King's Thunder does it. It uses milestones. For newer DMs especially, don't go against the grain. If it says to use milestones, just use milestones, okay? Now, all of that being said, let's disregard, and I'm not going to talk about milestones anymore, because the remainder of the video is going to show you how I wrangle through XP. It's what I've used 90-95% of the time in my 40 years of being a dungeon master, almost 40 years or so. And I don't even remember, if I look way back to my origins with D&D back in original box set stuff and first edition, I don't think there was a milestone award system in place. We always awarded numbers. You always gave numbers, and there was always these charts you can refer to. And the reason why that was, I remember that being the thing is because I think it's first edition, but I know it's definitely old school D&D way back there, where the XP chart was different depending on what character you played. And what I mean by that is if you were a thief, you only needed something like 1,250 experience points to level from 1 to 2. Whereas a paladin needed like double that to level from 1 to 2. So things were always, made to be at varying levels depending on what you played. Okay, that's something that now, if you look at the XP chart now, I mean, it's pretty simple and basic for everyone. It applies to all characters. Here's the chart right now. Notice there's no delineation between if you're playing this class. If you're a character in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, here's the chart that you go off of. When you're level 1, you're assumed to start at 0 EXP. The moment, no matter what you play, you reach 900 EXP, you're going to be at level 3. And then you notice it starts to kind of increase the gaps there, and it becomes a little more difficult to really climb up. You're going to get through those first few levels pretty quickly, perhaps within a session or two. Okay? So I only remember using experience points and breaking it out. Okay? And that's what I choose to use 99% of the time. It's what I use every single time if I am running in my own campaign and my own world or setting. As said, I will use the milestone system or whatever's recommended or suggested in official pre-published stuff, okay? And I think you should do the same. But whether you decide to continue forever using milestone or the XP mathy stuff, that's for you to decide and what fits best. This is a reward system that I definitely recommend talking over with your players and giving them as much input, if not more, than you as the dungeon master. And whatever everyone thinks they enjoy most or whatever they feel is going to be best, use that. Because some players want to feel those numbers or they want to be given numbers after every session so that they have an idea of how far they're and how quickly they're progressing. Whereas the milestone system is kind of you're silent until you get the level. In the EXP system, if I'm level 3, but you give me 410, it's like, okay, I have 1,310. I'm only like 1,400 away from level 4. Okay, you gave me another 1,000. I only need 400 more, and so on, okay? So decide among your group what's going to fit best. Now, all that being said, how do I handle experience points? The first thing I will do is, obviously, you need to know where your group is, right? So let's just assume, keep simple math, we're at level 1, all right? At level 1, my PCs are at 0 EXP. Okay? The thing that I consider above anything else is pacing. And the manner in which I do that depends on, let me move this without, I'm doing my little Joe Rogan here where he tells you, move the microphone closer. The thing I look to is what I call key levels. Okay? In 5th edition D&D, there are many key levels. Sometimes the key level might apply to specific character classes, but in general, key levels are, for instance, like level 4. Why level 4? Because every class in the game at level 4 now gains access to feats if you didn't let them start with some. Or they can choose not to take the feat and increase some stats. It's called an ASI, okay? That's something, that's a huge advancement point. And notice that's what sort of the key levels are, is there points in the game or upon leveling up that really big things happen. Another obvious key level is going to be level 3, because that's where subclasses get on board. That's where your fighters, your rogues, a rogue can choose now to go down the assassin route or the arcane trickster route. Both of those are going to play very differently. So that's a key level. Another key level is level 5 for spellcasters, because that's when level 3 spells come on board. And I know that a lot of this stuff is going to take some time for you to wrangle through it. You have to become familiar with what spells fall in what level ranges. But as a level 5 wizard, you now have some level 3 spell slots, which allows you to cast Fireball, which allows you to cast Fly. Now, why are these key levels? Okay, and notice I'm trying to find sort of a blanket range of key levels that apply to all of the characters. As I said, there are some levels that, like a fighter, for example, they don't just get feats or ability score improvements at 4 and 8 and 12 and 16 like most of the other classes. They get it many, many more times than that. But I'm trying to find key levels that kind of apply to the table as a whole. 3 for subclasses. 5 is a big one for any group that has casters, because level 3 spells really start creating some separation in the game. Okay. And by focusing on the key levels, what it does is it kind of gives me like a big picture, a big umbrella over the whole, what's the word I'm looking for? The way in which I dish out experience points. This key level concept allows me to control the pacing. It helps me sort of decide how quickly do I want my players to advance in levels. You see, the key levels like 3, which is about subclasses, that's what I focus on as the key level. So when my group is level 1, which is at 0 EXP, it's going to take them 900 EXP to get to level 3. Obviously, they're going to go through level 2 first. But you might be wondering, why won't I focus on 300 EXP, which is what it takes to get to level 2? From the player's perspective, for the most part, the significance of level 3 is so big that they kind of gloss over level 2, and the only value of gaining level 2 is it allows them to be one step closer to 3. So the key levels don't just apply to you and me as a DM, they also apply to the players as well. The players are really focused on levels 4, level 3, level 5 for spells, level 14 where they get like their highest level subclass abilities and such. So the pacing is how quickly do I want them to have access to their subclasses. The best example I can give is this level 5 thing where level 3 spells come on board. And if you stay with me here, I think you'll start to quickly formulate how kind of answering the big question of how much EXP do you give and how quickly do you give it. If you can understand this pacing thing and the key level concept, you'll figure this out. And when you do, I'm fishing for the word, but I can't think of it. Your administration, the giving out of experience points, becomes something that you can weave through quite elegantly, and it starts to make sense. It starts to make the players feel like they're leveling up sort of just right. They're not getting it too quickly where they feel like the campaign is coming to an end. They don't feel like they're rushing through the journey and the experience, but they also don't feel like they're just waiting for the next level and you're being stingy. If you can focus on and figure out the pacing and key levels, let's look to level 5, okay? Now, we have level 1 PCs who are currently at 0 experience points. To get to level 5, the PCs need 6,500. How quickly do I want to give them 6,500 EXP? At level 5, if there are wizards, spellcasters in the party that now have access to level 3 spells, they can now cast Fireball. But perhaps more importantly, they can now cast Fly. Flight is such a key level that it changes the manner in which you as a dungeon master prepare your content. You see, without access to flight, levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, your spellcasters, and the group, when they approach any walled location, any walled village, any walled city, you can rely as a dungeon master on social interaction, on the group having to use charisma to work their way through the guards in order to enter that city, should the guards wish to keep them out. Barriers, locks, high walls, chasms that they have to cross. All of these things become elements that you can use to provide obstacles, to provide challenges, to provide gameplay. The moment that key level is hit, 6,500, and your wizard can now cast Fly, walls lose a great deal of their emphasis in your world. I mean, think of it from the perspective that you hear about from MMO designers in video games. The moment we gave players flying mounts, the scale of the world shrinks, the verticality changes, everything changes. So by focusing on that example and thinking of level 5 being a key level because of access to certain spells, What other levels, what other key levels give players, your characters in your world, access to certain traits and abilities? And again, think global. Think the entire group, not just the fighter that gets these specific traits and abilities. But if you think big picture, such as everyone now has access to subclasses, that's a big deal when they didn't have that before, because the characters changed significantly at that point. So focus on those key levels, and what you can do is I can now say, if they're at level 1 with zero EXP, how quickly do I give them enough EXP to get 6,500? I can simply ask myself, how quickly do I want them to make my walls obsolete? How quickly do I want to sort of remove that element of gameplay, or at least make it less threatening to them? Okay, so that's just sort of the overarching umbrella of thinking through pacing. And in order to think through pacing, you have to figure out what your key levels are. They're generally going to be the same in standard. Doesn't matter what campaign you play in. All wizards have access to fly at level 5. All characters have access to subclasses at level 3. That's as written in the rules. So a lot of that key level stuff is going to be the same through and through. Now, obviously, if you don't have any spellcasters in your party, you maybe don't have to worry about level 5 as much. You maybe need to worry about the 4 and the 8 and the 12 because you have martial classes that can now take feats and increase their stats and so on. But by focusing on that stuff, it helps you formulate the pacing because it tells you as the DM how quickly, how many sessions in do you want to start changing up your content, because their capabilities are going to force you as the dungeon master to have to weave through that. If I want to keep flying creatures, enemies, as a great threat to my PCs for quite a while, for a few sessions, to bring about that danger of anything that flies, I need to keep the pacing such that they do not reach 6,500 EXP for quite a few sessions. If I give them 6,500 EXP within 3 sessions, my flying creatures from session 3 on are not a big deal anymore. Okay, that's the way to look at it. So now that we have that big umbrella and how important that is, let's kind of zoom in to all the details, the people holding the umbrella, the things underneath the umbrella. How do we hand out EXP? Of course, you can always just use monsters, as I said. Okay, whatever monsters you use, quite simply, if I'm going to use orcs, let's say, use what's written. Don't go against that. Don't try and don't reinvent the wheel. An orc is a CR 1/2. They're worth 100 EXP. If my PCs fight and defeat 10 orcs, they just got 1,000 experience points. Quite simple. Now, I use these CRs, this kind of appropriate level range, to figure out about how much EXP I want to award for non-combat activities, for things my PCs do that have nothing to do with fighting. Because if the only manner in which you award experience points is through combat, you're going to have it all the time. Otherwise, they're never going to progress, right? Your pacing is going to slow to a crawl any session where you don't have a fight, and maybe you're handling a bunch of socio-political stuff or intrigue or investigative city maneuvering stuff, but there's no real fight. The other thing is you're not able to use creatures that are more powerful than the group, like creatures that would immediately TPK them. Because if you do, and a fight happens, you're going to TPK the group. But if the group says, I don't want to fight these guys, there's going to be that weird space where they think, well, if we don't fight though, guys, we don't get any EXP. Okay? So you have to have more methods upon which they gain experience points. All right? The combat ones are pretty simple. Whatever you use in the fights, just use the EXP as written. Okay? Now, if my group is level 1, I'm looking around CR 1, maybe CR2 at most, down to 1/2, 1/4, 1/8. Okay? So what do I mean by that? The highest I might have as a fight that might be challenging, perhaps deadly, is some CR2 monsters, maybe with this guy and some lower level orcs. A CR2 is worth 450 XP. A CR2 is appropriate. I know the CR system's wonky, and that's not for this video, but a CR2 is appropriate for about a level 1, level 2 group. So using that number, this tells me about how much EXP I'd want to award for non-combat tasks. If they overcome a fight with this orc, they're going to get 450 XP for it. I can kind of think through how difficult that fight is. They're going to have to expend some resources, right? The rogue is going to have to use some skills, and he's going to have to roll a hide check. They're going to have to roll attacks. They're going to have to deal damage and kill this thing. If they do, they get 450. Well, when they're maneuvering through town and there's no fight, but the rogue is still having to roll hide to hide from some guards that they're trying to sneak by. And then they have to go and get this like rare tome, and they roll more skill checks and they find it. And then to avoid a fight, they have to roll more persuasion checks and intimidation checks to get past the guards. And then they open lock, right? They're doing things. They're expending resources. Perhaps the wizard is casting spells to charm and do things to get to that tome. If they get the tome, even though it's not a fight, they should be rewarded with about 450 XP. Where does that come from? Am I saying that the tome is equivalent to this specific orc? No, but the CR of the monsters you're having your group fight informs you roughly of the level range or the number range that you should award for non-combative things. When your PCs make progress along a quest, this is what happens in the milestone system. Give them EXP for that. They're making progress. When they finish a big task, sort of the Skyrim thing, right? Or World of Warcraft, when you finish it, it checks off that quest and it is removed from your quest log. When they complete something big, when they actually finish, maybe award them double that EXP. Now, I know the numbers can be kind of like, well, should I give them 450 or should I give them 900? Which is it? Remember, we always go back to that beginning that I rambled about for 15 minutes. Figure out your pacing and about how quickly you want them to reach sort of those thresholds of those key levels where you have to make changes in your creation based on the capabilities of your group. If they're really close to level 5, but you don't want them to have fly because you're planning next session, they know they're going to a castle and it's walled in with a drawbridge, you can't have them have fly because you just changed the dynamics of that encounter. And if they're within 1,000 EXP of getting level 5, maybe don't give them double EXP when they do something. Don't give them 900, only give them 450. So that way you give yourself a buffer of a couple of sessions before they get fly and completely, outshine your castle encounter. Okay? So I think you can see there the manner in which we can figure out what sort of number range you might give for non-combative stuff. Now, kind of towards the end here on the video, the other thing is always award equal EXP if they overcome an encounter and they put forth effort, even if they don't kill the creature. Similar to where I said you are stuck if the only method in which you award EXP is by combat, you're also stuck if the only way they get EXP in combat is if they actually kill the creature. Because now you can't have them fight something that's 10 CR above them. And I think that's wrong. Like, I've always been known in my worlds, and I've always told my players, they know this. Just because all of you are wielding knives does not mean you're going to run into someone with a gun. You need to give your players a way out. You need to give them enemies that are so dangerous that they have to run. Give them hints. Poke and prod early on and introduce villains and so that they learn quickly, if you fight this, I'm going to kill you and you're all going to make new characters. But give them a way out. If they accomplish the objective and steal the item they need without actually fighting this guy, give them the 450 EXP. If they put forth the effort, but round 1 against a dragon, the dragon's breath weapon kills the 2 healers and they say, the hell with this. And they pick up both healers and just say, we got to get out of here. Give them that 15,000 dragon EXP or whatever it is. Give it to them. They should be rewarded for that because what it does is it now makes the option, which is a huge deal, the option of running, the option of respecting the more dangerous things and finding another elegant solution to overcome any challenge or obstacle without just Hulk smashing. And they're not going to shy away from those options, which is what you want, because you're going to reward them accordingly. Okay? So always reward non-combat EXP when you feel like they've overcome some challenge. Always reward them in combat, even if they fail, especially if PCs die, but they didn't kill the boss or whatever. Because as in life, you will most likely learn more from failing, assuming you learn from your mistakes, than you will from success. And then finally, the other thing I do is I always keep all my players on the same level with EXP. If I have a player missing from the table, when I divide up the total EXP for the night, which I always give kind of at the end of the session, I'll divide it by how many players are actually there playing. If there was only 7 of my 8 players, 1 player's missing, in the fight against the orcs, I only have to divide up the total monster EXP by 7, not 8. But when that player, the 8th player, shows up the next session, I just tell him, hey, guys, what's your EXP currently at? And I just tell him, set your EXP to that much. I keep them the same because I don't like the whole, a player dies, the group is level 10, and you need to make a level 1 character. Because then you pigeonhole yourself again. What happens is, any level 10 creatures is a decent challenging fight for the level 10s, but it's going to completely annihilate the level 1. And level 1 creatures, which are a good challenge for the level 1 character, is pointless and trivial to the level 10s. So I keep everyone at the same EXP at all times. I don't separate and delineate to, specific role play. Now, this is just me. I've done it before, but right now I just keep it all the same. If one character is shining for that session and he's doing a bunch of good stuff, I don't give him more EXP specifically. I award extra roleplay EXP at the end of the night, but that goes to everyone. Because the other thing it does is it keeps everyone else sort of cheering on that one individual who's really shining for the night. And it keeps group cohesion, and it doesn't create more separation at the table. So that's a really long video, but it's extremely important because it's how you level up. And, and the last thing I have to say is don't be afraid to level them up. Just like I said with treasure, give treasure. There's 20 levels there, folks. As long as you control that pacing, you might take 2 years of real time before your PCs reach above level 15. That's fine. But don't be afraid to allow them to creep into those level 8 and 9 spells. Allow a sorcerer to finally have and cast Wish one time. Now, if you want to kind of keep it flat and you don't like gameplay beyond level 12, then all your campaigns can end at 12. That's fine. But use the range of levels. They're there. Don't be afraid to give out experience. It's a wonderful, amazing reward system. And as I said in the treasure video, perhaps even better than gaining treasure. Give it to them. And if they get out of sorts, and who doesn't want to use 7 Baylors in a fight? I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks, everyone. Take care.